I grew up in a small town in Utah County, Payson, Utah. My heritage is the Kimball name has been associated with the Mormon Church since the beginning of the Mormon Church and is one of the longest standing names associated with the Mormon experience. Actually, my great-great-great-grandfather, Heber C. Kimball, was the first counselor of Brigham Young when the Mormon pioneers came across the plains into Salt Lake Valley. And I have that experience, and the heritage and the interaction with the Mormon Church is part of who I identify as an individual beyond the spiritual aspect of the religion. I often tell people that growing up in Utah and growing up Mormon, oftentimes I identified first as a Mormon and then second as a U.S. citizen, as an American, interestingly enough. I was baptized and raised in the LDS Church, the Mormon faith, from the time I was born. I probably identified and knew that there was something a little bit different. I didn't know what that different necessarily was from a very early age. My dad was involved with athletics, and I would often go with him into practice. I knew that there was an interesting affinity I had towards the other basketball players. Now that might be something that most kids identify with, and as they admire and look up to those individuals to whom they aspire to imitate as they grow older. But I do recall, I had an older brother, I had two older brothers growing up, and the one just older than me was 3 years older than I was. And I remember my first love was actually the best friend of my brother, and how going through and identifying that I actually was very much in love with that individual. Interestingly enough, I took a path and made a decision at some point in my life to live according to the church's teachings, and I buried who I was as an individual growing up. Through high school, I was very involved. I was a basketball player on the high school basketball team. I was in the a cappella choir and the regular choir, and I was also the student body president of Payson High School. And interestingly enough, I was nominated twice as the most preferred man by the women in the high school. There was one story growing up that when I was very, I guess what you'd call the in crowd or the popular crowd at Payson High School, small high school indeed, but there was one time that the group was actually going to be singing, and I was paired up with somebody that had been marginalized as an individual. She was somebody that was in the choir I knew very well. She'd been in school with me my whole high school experience. But the individual was marginalized because she was extremely overweight. And I was paired to do a song and dance routine with her for a spring concert. And it amazed me at one time that after the concert, there a lot of people came up to my family and went out of their way to say it was really interesting how well Ken handled that experience. That really touched me because the only thing I did was handle that experience as treating one human being as another human being. And I think my experience has allowed me the opportunity of seeing what people would be and feel like on the margins, being gay and being Mormon. I've been able to be much more sensitive to the needs of other individuals than probably I would have been had I just grown up a straight white man in America. I came out right after I graduated from BYU. I moved away to Los Angeles, and I've lived in LA, Dallas, Austin, and Miami. And my partner, my husband, and I recently moved back to the area, and we're an out couple. Everybody in my family knows about us, and the family experience has been interesting. My family reacts from all ends of the spectrum, from those that completely accept us into their lives as equals, and from those that have actually let us know that as a couple we're not welcome in their home to interact with their kids. There was a very painful experience with one sibling where he let me know that I was welcome in his home, but as a couple we weren't because he was afraid of the influence that we might have on his 5 young boys. And that's hard to understand why somebody would shut love out of from a child, because that's all we'd want to do is to interact with them from a place of love and caring. But on the flip side, we have some wonderful interactions with some nieces and nephews and from the siblings that are open from that experience. while I was going to BYU, I actually did go into counseling, and I had to deal with the sexuality. And I had a counselor, interestingly enough, his name was John Freud. And I didn't experience any of the interactions or some of the stories that I'd heard about what goes on with reparative therapy at BYU. I didn't have any of that. So I don't know John's background or why he took a certain route with me in my interactions, but he was very caring and very loving, and it was an opportunity to talk about that. One last thing I do want to talk about is when I came out, it was in the late 1989, 1990 period, and so the internet wasn't available. It was very lonely trying to deal with my sexuality on my own. I actually was engaged to get married to an individual, but something deep inside, and I have to thank my mom and dad for that, because I had to be true first to myself. Something inside of me told me that wasn't where I needed to go. And I don't know where I drew that strength, but I just said, I can't do this. And I didn't know what it meant to be gay at the time, and I had to be honest to myself. And I'm really proud of that moment in my development of saying, I don't know what this means, but I'm gonna follow it and figure it out and be the best person I can despite being gay. And that sounds odd, but despite being gay, I saw it as a character flaw, if you would, or a flaw, something that had to be fixed. And one of the things that did help me is Carolyn Pearson's book, Goodbye, I Love You. She actually went to BY High with my mom and dad, so I was familiar with her, and I've reached out to her and thanked her for that branch of support that she extended through that work of art. Thank you very much.